Jason from GameRave.com, and this is another anniversary episode of GameRaveTV. Alright guys, with this next episode of GameRaveTV, we are going to talk about the PlayStation Online Connection CD, and for that matter, PlayStation modem. Now, in today's gaming society, thinking of a system with no internet connection is kind of bizarre. You know, with the eShop, PlayStation Network, Xbox Live, but back in the day, it was fairly few and far between to have a system that had online capabilities, even one that was built in with it. Now, while in the United States, online gaming, or at least online connectivity, really didn't hit it off big in the early stages of gaming, while the Super Nintendo and Genesis, and to a degree the Nintendo, had their accessories like the X-Band, which allowed a system-to-system connection for fighting games and so forth, it wasn't really until the 32-bit era that you saw online start taking a hold on the systems. So, the internet on gaming systems really didn't take off until the Sega Saturn, when you could buy the Netlink package for $200. The little cartridge that plugged into the, obviously, cartridge slot allowed you to browse the web as well as play against other people in games. This was followed up with Sega releasing the Dreamcast, and on the Dreamcast modem was actually built into it, a 56K modem by default, which you could later upgrade to a broadband. Now, the important thing connecting those two systems is the browser. The web browser was actually made by a company called Planet Web, and that is where our story begins with the PlayStation Online CD. Before we get back to Planet Web, we need to discuss why the online CD exists, and that's where Lightspan comes in. I've never really talked about it in GameRaveTV or pause mode, but if you've been to my website, GameRave.com, we actually have a section there for the Lightspan games. And Lightspan itself is actually a series of educational games that were released only to schools. They were never available publicly. And the games, quote-unquote, weren't your typical educational type garbage that you would see on the retail PlayStation and other game systems. They actually had a core curriculum to follow, and they were actually fairly well done. But that's a whole nother review for another time. Now, at its high point, Lightspan actually reached out to about 3,600 schools all across the United States. Of those 3,600, there were a select few schools chosen as testing grounds for what would now be known as the Lightspan Online CD, which brings us to this video. Now, you're probably sitting there going, why would you use a game system to surf the internet when you can just do it on a computer? And the answer is cost. Computers in the early 90s were ridiculously overpriced, and I mean like insanely overpriced. Nowadays you can get a pretty decent laptop or computer that can do everything you want, including a majority of gaming, for about $400 to $700. The same computer in 1997 would have probably cost you about $1,500, and that's with a CRT and a ball mouse and a serial port computer keyboard. It was awful. Compare that to the then $150 PlayStation and you can see the price savings comparison. So you now have a $150 computer sitting in front of you that can access the internet and send email. As far as specifics go, there were a cute couple of things Lightspan did with this CD. Now, the browser itself was a straight-up browser with a catch, which we'll get to later on. It also had an email program, but all of the actual emailing was handled on the internet side. The disk was essentially just a front end. What was adorable with the email program, and I don't know if it was ever fully implemented, but one of the research PDFs brought it up, was that Lightspan was planning, or at least implemented, a sort of Santa Claus-like atmosphere, which was younger kids could actually use the email to email the characters from the games, like Mars Moose, and have them reply back. It's just an adorable little angle that I never would have ever, thought of at the time. Really cool. Let's get to the nitty-gritty. How did I come across this CD? Well, funny story. I almost threw it out by accident. Years ago, at least 12, 13 years ago, if not more, I had bought a box auction off of eBay, and it just had a bunch of stuff, games, teacher's books, things like that. And after I'd pulled everything out of the box, I went to go put the box near the garbage, except when I looked down to let go of it, I saw a little corner of an envelope underneath the box flap. And when I pulled it out, it turned out there were 3 CDs underneath the flap that I almost tossed out. The first 2 were the very rare, and I don't know if anyone even has these besides me, was the Unknown Variable games. And we'll get to those some other time. The third disc was obviously the online CD. Now, at the time, I didn't think anything of the Online Connection CD because of another disc in the Lightspan library, the Family Connection CD. That disc was literally just a video showing parents what Lightspan was all about, so I figured the Online Connection CD was just them discussing their website, and who gave a care about that? Oh, hindsight. One fateful day when I was like, you know what, we're going to update GameRave.com, get some photos going, blah, blah, blah. I threw the Online Connection CD into the system to start photo screen capping some footage and hit a button, and the button said, initializing port. Hang up the phone. And I was like, what do you, there's a... And that's when it hit me. I was looking at an internet browser disk for a system that didn't have a modem. Now, I went through a lot of trials and tribulations to get to this point in the online CD story. Most of that I have put in a web page that we'll post later on in the video and link to you below, so you get the full details. But right now we're going to skip to the good stuff. And that is what constructs a complete Lightspan Online Connection CD hookup. Now, there are technically 5 pieces to the online connection setup. 3 of those are required. The other 2 are optional. And what are those pieces? Well, obviously you need the disk. That's 1. 2, you would need the modems and or cable that plugs into the modem to make sure it can dial out. And then 3, a memory card, which you need for a specific save file. The other pieces were an actual keyboard mouse adapter that plugged into the controller port, and then the keyboard and mouse. Now, the last 2 are unneeded because I obviously did everything with the controller, but it would have helped a lot in the typing. So you're probably asking, why did it take so long to get to this point? Well, funny story. With the Lightspan Connection CD and just the act of taking the PlayStation online, there really was no documentation about it anywhere. Up until the point when I finally made the password breakthrough, there were 3 things known. A, there was the keyboard adapter. B, there was a image of an icon for the back of the packaging from a European behind-the-scenes binder, and 1 or 2 sentences in random online publications saying, hey, schools are using the Lightspan for online purposes. And that was it. So the knowledge I had going in and trying to figure out how to make this thing work was based off my own personal experiences. And holy shit, were they all wrong. And I apologize ahead of time because I inadvertently sent the internet on a wild goose chase. Let's discuss that. The first mistake came up with how the system actually connected to the modem, or at least plugged a phone line into it. Up until that point, the only knowledge I had of anything online related with the PlayStation was the Shark wire. Now, I worked for GameShark for 2 years, and when I was hired, the Shark wire for the N64 had already started floundering. And at the time, they were planning on making one for the PlayStation because the N64 one did so poorly, they scrapped it. This is a true story. On the day I was interviewed in Maryland by then, GameShark dude John Hayes, I held the shell of the Shark wire in my hand. It was just an empty shell, there was no circuit board, but I was like, oh wow, this is going to be kind of cool. Who knew? Thought nothing of it for 10 years. So, thinking that the parallel port, which is where the Shark wire went, was the key to everything, I started doing all this crazy research, seeing if I could hack up a Game Shark to become this weird portal for the serial cable to a modem. Nothing. Even though the Game Shark can communicate with a computer for the hacking utilities and so forth, it just would not connect to anything. There was nothing. Damn it. The second problem came in what can only be described as the greatest misunderstanding and context problem of all time. When the Lightspan CD first loads up, if you don't have the save data, you get a message that reads to the effect of, you need a Lightspan memory card. Now, if you read a sentence that says, you need a Lightspan memory card, and you are the proud owner of a Yarose, which has a specific Yarose access card, you're thinking, damn it, it needs an access card. Crap. And that unfortunate misread set me back years of research, and we'll get to that in a second. Now, the Yarose was actually the key to figuring out everything, and it was only because of a single piece of silver wire. Here's what happened. All those developer and designer books I showed you guys in the game room video, I plowed through every one of those. Every page, every chapter, every note, every handwritten note I could find. There was no mention of anything modem related in any of those developer books. And one page I came across had a phrase on it. And I don't remember which phrase it was, but that's not important. All I know is I saw that phrase, and my first thought was, hey, that's the same thing the ROZ cord uses to talk to the PC when you're syncing up to program a game. So I went to the ROZ cable and flipped it over and noticed something weird. It had an 8th line. A link cable only has 7. The ROZ had 8. So I was like, well, wait a minute. If this is a comm and it's communicating, maybe this is the modem port. So after doing some crazy research with people that have more or less torn the PlayStation motherboard apart, I finally found the answers I was looking for. The serial port was the answer all along. That being said, I came up with a new problem. Well, crap. I still don't have a cord or a modem or proprietary modem to plug this thing into the serial port. And that is when another month and a half of Google searches turned up the idea to make a cord that could possibly plug in to a dial-up modem. And thanks to an online friend who was beyond amazing, I got this. This is a link cable that has basically been stripped down and repinned, so it has the missing 8th cord, plus another one for ground. And I plugged that into the system serial port, and using online references to dial-up modems to figure out the pinouts on the modem, we used the breakaway cables to plug into the pins. Tried dialing out with the modem disk. Nothing. Tried different configurations. Nothing. Another 2 weeks passed by. Meanwhile, there was the memory card problem. Pressing some random buttons out of frustration came up with a little option menu, and the key was the password. And I was like, oh, it's got a password too. Well, crap. I'm out of luck. So another, week, 2 weeks passed by, etc. And out of complete and utter boredom, I threw the Lightspan disk into my laptop to see if I could basically make an ISO out of it, so in case I cracked it, like I did the NBA 2-ball disc, I'd have a backup. And normally, when you throw a PlayStation disc into a computer, you'll see a couple of random files, a bunch of unreadable files, blah, 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 blah. What popped up was a bunch of HTML files that I could open and read. Holy shit. Now, what made it even more amazing was that you could literally just highlight and copy the HTML file and dump it into a WYSIWYG program like Adobe Dreamweaver or FrontPage, and the HTML started creating the actual pages that I'd seen on the disk. So I was like, holy hell, let's go exploring. And besides seeing links and a couple of incomplete pages you have never seen on the disk through normal means, was all the actual gibberish of programming and what have you caught in between. So as I was scrolling past all the gibberish and so forth, in the middle of a giant text block, and when I say text block, I mean just like matrix garbage. It was just like, whatever the symbols they give you when you're trying to open up a picture in a Word document, was the word baseball. Now, there was absolutely nothing sports related on this entire disc. And I was like, why would baseball be in the middle of this? And that's when it hit me. I yanked the disc out carefully of my laptop and threw it back in the PlayStation, hit the start button, hit the key, and typed in baseball as the password, and this whole new menu I'd never seen before popped up. And that menu just happened to be the exact same menu the Sega Netlink and the Sega Dreamcast used to set up their dialing functions. Sure enough, I filled in some gibberish, hit save, reset the PlayStation, and sure enough, there was no message about a Lightspan memory card issue. I had the file. It was never an access card. It was just the stupid configuration file to get things started, which means we were there. We had the will. We just needed the way. So now that we had the access card, the password, and the settings good to go, the poor PlayStation still would not dial out with that cable, even though I knew everything was hooked up correctly. So literally another, I think it was about a month, 2 months of research went by, and I'm talking like the deepest, darkest corners of the internet and Google you've ever seen. And one night, I had come across a site that I had never, I couldn't even tell you what I Googled to find that site. And it was just a wall of ASCII text talking about all the chips and pins and so forth in the system. And I had gotten so frustrated and dejected in another empty search, I said, screw it, I'll just read this out of boredom, and grabbed myself some coffee and started sipping, scrolling through stuff, and I was like, wow, this dude went all out. He identified every voltage, etc. And once again, because life is mysterious, I stopped the scroll, grabbed my cup of coffee, and started to sip. And my eyes went back to the screen and saw a little phrase of a paragraph that basically said, oh, teehee, there's voltage that's swapped in the PlayStation. If you were to like make a circuit for this, you could make a modem, a mouse, and a keyboard. That sip of coffee I took spit across the screen as I realized that was the point. That was the whole reason nothing was working. There was a middleman. I needed a circuit. Well, my online friend, who is amazing, gave me this. And what you were looking at is the circuit that basically converts whatever it is the PlayStation's thinking and doing into a signal that can be understood by the modem. We were there. We had everything we needed. Now, we're going to leave a lot of this trial and error history and story to the web page, but I did want to show this video. Originally, I was using a US Robotics dial-up modem, and nothing was happening. Absolutely nothing. So, out of frustration again, I ended up going to eBay and tracked down the closest approximate modem that would have been around in 1997, which was a Zoom model. And the video you're about to see here is my attempt to have the PlayStation dial into the modem with the modem connected to a Magic Jack. And the reason for the Magic Jack was that it would allowed me, without actual dial-up service or an actual landline to use, the Magic Jack would at least confirm that the modem was dialing the numbers. And the video right here is the first time I tried it with the new modem, and you see the Magic Jack dialing. And let me tell you, after months of research and struggle and just dead ends, watching a 7-digit number pop up on a computer screen is one of the greatest moments in my collecting career. Once we had successfully dialing, the problem came to actually getting it to work. I actually went to about 2 or 3 different locations to use their landlines. I had signed up for internet service, dial-up internet service, with the hopes of using this to do the videos and so forth. And I tried Juno, I tried ISP.com, tried a different one, so forth. Every attempt, you would actually see the modem successfully log in with the email and password, or the username and password, but it would just not click over. It would always give you a random error, stuff like that. No host found. It would never actually give you a web page, or at least a clear sign that it was actually connected to the internet. That's when some research discovered that, oddly enough, Sega Saturn and Dreamcast fans had figured out a way to get their dial-up systems online with no landline. That's a whole other process I'll leave to the webpage. But long story short, with that setup and some experimenting, we finally got the PlayStation online. And what I mean by that is it's correctly reaching the DNS servers. So like if you typed in like Craigslist.com, it would actually change to chicago.craigslist.com. Or if you typed in us.playstation and say, hey, I can't display this, you need security sockets, which means it was online, it just wouldn't give us a web page. Now, to get it to display a web page, we'll discuss that at the end of the video. But for right now, we'll continue forward, acting like it actually is 100% online, and we're going to show you what kids got to see in 1997 going online with their PlayStation. This is Lightspan.com. You know what today is Play-Doh, but this is actually the original website that you'd have gone to, back in 1997. There was actually portals for teachers, for the students, for parents. It linked to activity sites. It linked to examples of how you can actually create your own website. In fact, on the Lightspan CD, 4 of the schools that were part of the program are actually linkable from the disk to their original, what would have been their Lightspan.net accounts. We've actually tried reaching out to all 4 of the schools on the disk, and unfortunately none of them have gotten back to us or even admitted that we had emailed them or contacted them. So now, it's here at Lightspan.com that you could have created your actual educational email account through a website called, at the time, edmail.com, more likely short for educational email. Lightspan had its own portal that you could click to and link to it, and as you can see from my nice little typing here, we actually found the original form to fill out for your email. Unfortunately, once you click through, it just becomes a 404 error page. Besides the schools and the Lightspan pages, on the actual online disc, there's a whole bunch of hidden website pages. Considering it's actually marked as a beta, this must have been just for simple demonstration purposes when they were showing it to schools and so forth. But on the disc, and this is a great time flashback, check out these original from 1997 web pages for Yahoo and SonyOnline.com. Woo! Newman! Love Newman. Now, the curiosities on the disc don't stop there. The reason we brought up Planet Web in the beginning is because Planet Web designed the web browser for the PlayStation. Now, if you're thinking, oh, that's cool, they did all three, what's not cool is that the reason we're probably having trouble with the PlayStation disc getting it 100% online, is because it is the most duct-taped together disc you will ever see. In piling through the HTML files and comparing notes and so forth, the browser's data, at least of what you can read from it, is literally the Netlink browser disk. They just went in and removed Saturn and replaced PlayStation with it. Not only is the email pages the same, not only are the HTML warnings and listings of Haze commands and so forth the same, but if buried in the text near the bottom of one of the HTML files, they didn't even remove some of the Saturn coding. Like, you can actually see commands for the A, B, C, and Start button that obviously the PlayStation doesn't have. To make matters even more curious is that in one of the files you could open, it was essentially a directory of all the address lines of where certain things were. And in finding the Sony and the Yahoo pages, if you remember my Twitter account from a few months back, I posted a picture. That's because there's a directory on the disk that is quite literally nothing but garbage. It's this dude's floating head. There's an animated Diablo figure walking around, and a whole bunch of Beavis and Butthead thing, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I'm assuming these are just there for testing purposes. But the fact that they were left on there and not taken out, like, I want to go back to the Netlink disk and see if these are on the Netlink disk, because that would just prove how freaking lazy they were with it. Now, we've actually gone a little bit more in depth at the website with the comparison images of just how close the browsers are to each other as far as, you know, menus and so forth go. But this video is actually running long as it is, and I left a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor, so we're going to end the video here. That being said, a little bit of curiosity. This is the strangest disc I have ever laid hands on. To give you an idea of how weird it is, I tried using the disc in a PlayStation 2 with the memory card because I got the online adapter. The PlayStation 2 will not read the memory card file. It acts like there's nothing on the memory card. It's, among other craziness and so forth, it's the strangest thing I've ever seen. Alright guys, that being said, this was Project 4, which is getting the PlayStation Online, which we mostly did. That being said, tomorrow's project is the final one on the anniversary and is 2.5 hours long. We'll see you guys then. Take care.